Welcome to Fantasia, home of the Melodious. My name's Azallea, and today, gonna be bringing you guys another update to my Windwitch Ritual Beast deck. So I've been contemplating switching up the archetypes I play with my Windwitches. The next one I'm thinking of is going to be a Magispector deck. So if you guys are interested in a Windwitch Magispector build, please let me know in the comment section down below so I can gather the cards up for next month's deck profile. But without further ado, let's just jump right into this one we have right now. So starting off, we play 3 copies of Ritual Beast Tamer Elder. Now Elder, main card for the Ritual Beast archetype, because if you normal summon him, you can normal summon again during that same turn, another Ritual Beast monster that is. So if you get a Spiritual Beast on the field along with a Ritual Beast Tamer, you'll be able to contact fuse into one of the Ritual Beast fusions. So that's why we play 3 of him. He's the main enabler for the deck. Next off, for the next Tamer, we play 1 copy of Ritual Beast Tamer Wen. Now, Wen, if you normal summon her, you can target one of your banished Ritual Beast monsters and special summon it. So she's really great for just, 1 card, basically a 1-card fusion if you already have the proper setup. Speaking of which, we also play 1 copy of Ritual Beast Tamer Zephyr. Now, Pilica has the effect where if you normal summon her, you can target 1 Ritual Beast monster in your graveyard and special summon it. So, it's very similar to Wen, except that it brings things back from the graveyard. And of course, it's another name for the Ritual Beast, because each Ritual Beast monster can only be special summoned once per turn. So the more names that you have, the more times you'll be able to defuse with your Ritual Beast fusions and then summon them back out from the banish zone. So yeah, moving on, we also play 1 copy of Ritual Beast Tamer Lara. She has the same effect as Zephyr Pilica, so yeah, it's just another name that we play. She also has 2000 defense, which comes up sometimes. If you're defusing on your opponent's turn, you can sit on a 2000 defense body, instead of something like Elder, which has, I believe, like 1000. Okay, so next off, we also play 1 copy of Spiritual Beast Tamer Winda. Now, Winda is both a Spiritual Beast monster and a Ritual Beast Tamer monster, and that's really good because she can be used as a substitute for whatever you're missing, essentially. So she can be paired up with any of the Tamers, or you can pair her up with the Spiritual Beast monsters, which we'll get into in just a bit. But she has an effect where she floats, so if she's destroyed by battle or by card effect, you can special summon 1 Ritual Beast monster from your deck or extra deck, ignoring its summoning conditions. So you could potentially bring out a large boss monster with this, which is really great, or you could bring out one of the Tamers or another Spiritual Beast monster from your deck if you need the name or if you need an effect or something to go off. Okay, so next off, we're going to go into the Spiritual Beasts. So we play 3 copies of Spiritual Beast Kanahawk. Very standard ratio for this card. It is the main card in the deck. You combo this with Ritual Beast Tamer Elder. So Kanahawk, if you once per turn, you can banish 1 Ritual Beast card from your deck face up. So it could be the spells and traps too. And it's basically like a gold sarcophagus. So after your second standby phase, you get to add it back to your hand, but that normally never comes up because you're using his banish effect to set up your banish zone so that you can go for more defuses. You're going to set up with names, usually Wen, Pilica, Lara, or Winda, when you're trying to set up your banish zone. Speaking of setting up the banish zone in the graveyard, we also play 3 copies of Spiritual Beast Rapengu. Rapengu is the second best card to open up with the deck, the best being, of course, Elder and Kanahawk. If you open up with Rapengu, it's really good if you have something like Dimensional Fissure, because Rapengu banishes a Ritual Beast monster from your extra deck to send 1 Ritual Beast monster with the same type as that monster from the deck to the graveyard. So that's really important. Mainly because of the fact that if you have Dimensional Fissure, anything that you send from the deck to the graveyard gets banished instead. So instead of getting 1 card banished, like in Kanahawk's case, you can actually get 2 cards banished with Rapengu. So that's always something to keep in mind. Also, Rapengu can also, because Zephyr Pilica is a pendulum monster, if she goes to the extra deck, you can actually use Rapengu's effect to send her from the extra deck back to the graveyard. You can banish this Zephyr Pilica from your extra deck to send another Tamer from your deck to the graveyard, which is really nice. Okay, so next off we are playing 2 copies of Spiritual Beast Apoleo. Now, Apoleo is the beat stick of the deck, essentially. So once per turn during either player's turn, you can banish 1 Ritual Beast card from your graveyard, and for the rest of the turn, all Ritual Beast monsters you control will gain 500 attack and defense. So this is why he's really good for both offensive and defensive capabilities. So if you have something like a Lara on your side of the field in defense mode, if you use Apoleo's effect, she has 2,500 defense, which is huge for a level 1 monster. And Apoleo can boost himself actually up to 2300 attack just by banishing one monster in your graveyards, or one Ritual Beast card. You can banish the spells and traps too. And he's really great for just refueling your banish zone, because that's the Ritual Beast's like strong suit. That's their pool of resources essentially. And the Apoleo allows you to beat over a lot of different monsters that you probably wouldn't be able to otherwise. So you don't necessarily have to go into your fusions or your bosses to beat over things if you have multiple Apoleos triggering in a single turn. So for our last Spiritual Beast monster, we actually play one copy of Spiritual Beast Petalfin. Probably the worst one in the deck, because you don't want to ever draw into her. But she is a target that you can send off for Pengu, and it's another name for you to diffuse into. She does have the effect of, it's kind of like a compulsory evacuation device, because you can banish one Ritual Beast card from your hand, then target one card your opponent controls, and return it to the hand. So it's really good for just getting rid of like floodgate monsters or something. If your opponent has like a Vandy's Fiend or something like that, you can just normal summon the Petalfin, bounce it back. You can go into a rank 4, or you can go to a fusion. So that's the reason why I play one copy of her. You don't really need any more. She's just there for the utility. Okay, so next off, going to go into the Windwitches, very standard ratios. Play 3 copies of Windwitch Icebell. Now, Icebell, like a Terra Top, if you control no monsters, you can special summon her straight from the hand, and then you can special summon another Windwitch monster straight from your deck. She also inflicts 500 burn damage to your opponent, which doesn't really matter too much, but any damage adds up, especially for Ritual Beasts, because they have a difficult time attacking over the opponent's monsters sometimes. So the card that you'll be summoning off of Icebell is going to be Windwitch Glassbell. Now, when Glassbell is normal or special summoned, you can add one Windwitch monster from your deck to your hand. And the one you're going to be adding is typically going to be another copy of this, a Windwitch Snowbell. Now, Snowbell, if you synchro summon with this card, a Wind Synchro monster will be unable to be destroyed by your opponent's card effect. So if you make a Crystal Wing with this, your Crystal Wing will basically be quote-unquote invulnerable or indestructible. But also the cool thing is that if you control 2 or more wind monsters, you can special summon, and no non-wind monsters, but it doesn't matter because the entire archetypes here are all wind. You can special summon this straight from your hand. So none of this needs a normal summon. Just getting your Crystal Wing out does not need a normal summon at all. The important thing to realize is that Icebell, right here, she prevents you from summoning monsters from your extra deck during the turn you use her effect, that unless they are wind and level 5 or higher. But that doesn't matter because all the Ritual Beast fusions are level 5 or higher, so that's completely fine. And Glassbell has an even stronger restriction where you just can't special summon anything except wind monsters during the turn that you use her effect. But again, because both archetypes are wind, it doesn't really matter. And of course, to cap off our monster count, we play one copy of Max C, because if you don't play Max C, you'll never ever see it. So it's better to play one than to play none at all. So that does it for the monsters. Next off, we're going to go into the spell cards. Alright, so for the spell cards, starting off, we play one copy of Emergency Teleport. This is just to get our Ritual Beast Tamers out from the deck as soon as possible. You can use it on Elder, Lara, Zephyrin Pilica, or Wen. So 4 targets for the Emergency Teleport, really great utility card. Especially if you just summon a Spiritual Beast monster, you can get a Tamer straight from your deck to the field and go for your Contact Fusion. Another card that enables these contact fusions and all these combos is this card called Ritual Beast Return. And not a lot of players still, not a lot of Ritual Beast players are using this card, and I believe this is such a strong card. So you can banish one Ritual Beast monster from your hand, then target one of your Ritual Beast monsters that is banished or in the graveyard and special summon it. So this card is so good for just enabling your combos, especially if you have a handful of a lot of monsters, a lot of Ritual Beast monsters. So if you summon a Kanahaka or a Pengu and you use their effect, Ritual Beast Return instantly becomes live and can get rid of your hand of monsters and will facilitate your combos to search for your trap cards and your other spell cards for your Ritual Beasts. I actually ended up cutting Ritual Beast Bond in this build because it wasn't really needed. It didn't come up that often, so decided, you know what, I usually just search out some of the trap cards, and I tend to search out Ritual Beast Return more than I do Bond, so yeah, decided to cut that for now. But we do play 3 copies of Twin Twisters, because you need to get rid of back row. Doesn't matter if you're going first or second, you just want to get rid of things. And with the True King spells and traps, like even if you destroy them and they trigger and they try to destroy your monsters, your Ritual Beast fusions can tag out, so it's completely fine. I know that ulti Petalfin is also immune to destruction, so that's perfect. They can't even destroy her, and they can't destroy Crystal Wing either. So a lot of your monsters have enough protection that it doesn't really matter if the True King spell and traps go off. So yeah, 3 Twin Twisters is that reason why I play that. And also because you just need to protect your ulti Kanahawk. You can't summon ulti Kanahawk into a field full of back row, because if ulti Kanahawk is gone, then the deck kind of doesn't function. Okay. So next card, last spell of the deck. We play a very low spell count, is Dimensional Fissure. And like I mentioned earlier, it couples really well with cards like Rapengu, and it's just really great for disrupting your opponent as well. The opponent's stuff will all get banished, and it doesn't hurt you at all. In fact, it helps you because Ritual Beasts like to be banished. So that's it for these spell cards, very low count. Next off, we're going to go into the trap cards. So for the trap cards, starting off, we play 3 copies of Ritual Beast Steeds. Now Steeds, so good because it doesn't target. If you control a Ritual Beast monster, destroy monsters on the field up to the number of Ritual Beast monsters you currently control. So this card is just so good for just clearing out fields. You should never play less than 3 because it's the main card of the deck that you're going to be searching with ulti Kanahawk. So yeah, definitely one of the most powerful cards in the deck, by far. Next off, we were playing 2 copies of Ritual Beast Ambush. Taking some of your suggestions from my last deck profile, you said that Ambush, you didn't really want to see it too early on, and you could always search it out with ulti Kanahawk, and I agree with you. You know, there's always people who are switching between 2 and 3 Ambush. I've tested out 2, and it seemed to be working fine, because you don't really want to see it in your first opening hand, because you know, you're usually not set up too well on your first turn. Ritual Beasts are a little bit inconsistent, so yeah, cutting this down to 2 was definitely a good idea, and I'm liking it so far. Next off, we were playing 1 copy of Macrocosmos. This helps to disrupt our opponent as well as help fuel our banished zone. This hurts spell and trap cards too. This all cards sent to the graveyard can be banished instead. So it hurts like the True Dracos, like their spells and traps and stuff. So if you have Macrocosmos up and you blow up their spells and traps with Twin Twisters, they don't get to trigger their effects. So that's really great. Next off, we were actually playing 1 copy of Imperial Order, another suggestion from one of you guys in the comments in the last video, and I really do appreciate it because I forgot about it, just slipped my mind. I don't know how, because Imperial Order is just absolutely disgustingly broken. So if you don't know what this new Imperial Order does after the errata, it says negate all spell card effects on the field. Done. And that's basically it. Once per turn during the standby phase, you must pay 700 life points, and this is not optional, or the card is destroyed. So yeah, Imperial Order is just absolutely amazing. It just shuts down all of these spell cards, and a lot of cards now, a lot of decks rely on, you know, field spell cards, continuous spell cards. They all have these archetype support spell cards, and there's so many generic good ones too, like Raigeki, Twin Twisters, and things like that. And this just makes it so you don't have to worry about any of them. You don't have to worry about getting Darkhold. You don't have to worry about getting Twin Twistered when you're setting a bunch of back row, because Ritual Beasts are a very back row heavy deck. So yeah, Imperial Order just saves you a lot of trouble. Okay, so next off, we are going into the counter traps. We play 2 copies of Solemn Strike. Only 2 copies, not 3, because of the fact that True Dracos and things, you can't negate their summon with Solemn Strike, because they're tribute summoned. And Solemn Strike only negates things that are special summoned. So that's the reason for that, but it's still worth running because you can hit hand traps, such as Ghost Dash, which is going to be... not Ghost Dash, was it Ash Blossom? Whatever. But yeah, you can hit those cards. You can hit Maxi. Maxi is like the bane of this deck's existence. And you can hit a bunch of other things as well in the graveyard. And you can even hit the True Dracos if they start triggering their effects. So that's kind of cool too. But in place of a 3rd Solemn Strike that I could potentially be playing, I play 1 copy of Solemn Warning, because it can negate normal summons and tribute summons as well. So this hurts True Dracos, which is going to be a really popular deck. So yeah, it's a 40 card deck, and that does it for the traps. Next off, we're going to go into the side deck. Okay, so for the side deck, starting off, we are playing 3 copies of Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit, because it is the best hand trap going into this format, next to Ash Blossom, I guess. But if you can't afford Ash Blossoms like me, actually if you're playing online, you could play Ash Blossoms. But Ghost Ogre, I believe, is just so good because you hit things like Dragonic Diagram and destroy it. Keep in mind that Ash Blossom doesn't destroy, just negates the effect. Ghost Ogre can also hit like True Dracos when they're triggering on the field. You can hit their continuous spells and traps. You can hit so many different things with Ghost Ogre that it's so versatile. Definitely recommend playing 3. Next off, we are playing 1 copy of Raigeki because we sometimes have problems getting over big monsters. So if you're going second, definitely side in a copy of Raigeki so you can blow up your opponent's field and go off on your combos uncontested. Next off, we are playing 2 copies of Psy Impulse, and I cut this I believe I cut this back in my last profile, but I just had to put this back in because so many times I would be going off and my opponent would drop a Maxi on me. I would definitely want to use Psy Impulse to stop them. Basically, so if you open up with this card, you can tribute 1 psychic monster that you control and return all cards in your opponent's hand to the deck, and then they draw 3 cards. So this is so good if they get so many cards off of their Max C, and you can just drop a Psy Impulse. Against decks that generate a lot of advantage, like in their hand, you can also just side this card in, and well, their hand is gone. So it is just really, really good card. Highly recommend you test it out and just play around with it. This isn't the most competitive deck, but this card is such a blowout when it does go off. It's just fun to use. Okay, so next off, we play 1 copy of Torrential Tribute because there's some neat things that you can do with the Ritual Beast cards. If your opponent summons a card, you can you can activate your Ritual Beast Fusion's effect to tag out. So they return to the extra deck as a cost. Then you can flip Torrential Tribute as a chain link too. So Torrential Tribute will resolve, destroying everything on the field, and then your Ritual Beast Fusion will resolve and then summon back your Ritual Beast Tamer and your Spiritual Beast monster. So you can actually dodge Torrential Tribute in this deck, which is really, really cool. Okay, next off we are playing 3 copies of Quaking Mirror Force because of decks like True King Dinosaurs and things like that. They like to go straight for your face and they like to attack over everything. So Quaking Mirror Force makes it so that it's really, really easy to shut down their pushes, and it doesn't return their things back to their hand. You don't want to return Ultimate Conductor Tyranno back to your opponent's hand. They can always summon it again and things like that. So that's always great. Another thing is Ultimate Conductor Tyranno doesn't really hurt this deck too much because you can always contact fuse with face down Ritual Beast monsters. Fusions aren't like Synchros or XYZs where the monsters have to be face up for you to use them as materials. So that's something to keep in mind. Okay, next off we are playing 2 copies of Mask of Restrict. Against True Dracos, it also has the convenience of hitting Kaijus as well, and Kaijus kind of hurt, especially when you have Crystal Wing and some Ritual Beast Fusions on the field. You don't want them tributing over your cards. And last but not least, we actually play 3 copies of Lose 1 Turn as well. This is really great. It's like a mini skill drain, but it also protects you from your opponent's attacks. It's not too great now because of True Dracos, but against certain decks like Zodiacs and things, Lose 1 Turn is still really powerful card, and I would highly recommend you try it out. You can always bypass it with Ritual Beasts as well, because if you tag out with your Ritual Beasts, if you return them to the extra deck as a cost, then your field will actually be empty so that you can flip Lose 1 Turn before you summon back your cards from the Banish Zone. So Lose 1 Turn is really great in that regard. We do side a lot of trap cards because of the fact that you can always side out your Windwitch engine, which is around 6 cards, 3 Ice Spell, 2 Glass Spell, 1 Snow Bell, and you can add in any of these trap cards that you really need in order to help you with your matchups. Your opponent might also be expecting Crystal Wings and things, so they might side in Kaijus, but then they're going to end up seeing that, oh, well, there's no Crystal Wing, and their Kaijus are going to be less effective, right? So that's the reasoning for the cards that I side right here. Of course, you can side accordingly to your local meta. So that does it for the side deck. Next off, we're going to go into the extra deck. Okay, so for the extra deck, starting off, we play 1 copy of Lightning Chidori, very similar to Castel, except the fact that it is a 2-for-1. So this is really good, but it requires 2 level 4 wind monsters, which, in the case of this deck, doesn't really matter. So Lightning Chidori, when this card is XYZ summoned, you can target 1 set card your opponent controls and return that card to the bottom of their deck. And also, once per turn, you can detach 1 XYZ card from this XYZ material from this card, then target 1 face-up card your opponent controls and return that target to the top of the deck. So this is really good because of the fact that if your opponent's setting bluffs against you, like spells and stuff that they can't really use at the time, Lightning Chidori can just put that stuff back into their deck. You can also return dead things like continuous trap cards your opponent controls back to the top of their deck, so it's not useful to them when they draw it. It's going to be a dead draw, so you can basically put your opponent back a turn, which is really nice. Okay, next off we play one copy of Daigusto Emerald. Daigusto Emerald, of course, is here to recycle the ulti Kanahawk in case it does get sent to the graveyard through like Strike or a Kaiju or Solemn Warning or something like that. So definitely mandatory in my opinion to have a form of recovery that you can fall back on. And it's not too difficult to make rank 4s now, especially because we have Spiritual Beast Tamer Winda and Windwitch Glassbell, so there's that. And for our last XYZ monster, we play one copy of Dark Rebellion XYZ Dragon. Now, Dark Rebellion helps us beat over bigger monsters by having their attack, and Dark Rebellion can get pretty beefy that way. Having your opponent's attack is also really good because your Ritual Beast fusion monsters can start attacking over them as well. So yeah, only 3 XYZ monsters. They're really, like, you almost never go into them. They're just there for toolboxing options. So next off, we're going to go into the synchros, starting off with one copy of Windwitch Winterbell. Now, Winterbell's the main monster that you're going to be making if you're climbing into a Crystal Wing. So you can easily make this card with an Ice Bell, because Ice Bell summons a Glass Bell, and Glass Bell's a level 4 tuner. So you can synchro into a 7 into this. And Winterbell's effect is that you can target a Windwitch monster in your graveyard and inflict damage to your opponent equal to its level times 200. So normally you're going to target the highest level in your graveyard, which is going to be a Glass Bell. So Glass Bell is level 4. You can inflict 800 damage to your opponent with this card. One important thing to note is that this card can easily get Ghost Ogred if you do use this effect, so some people tend to just opt to not use it in case they do get Ghost Ogre and just go for the Crystal Wing safely. But in most cases, you can probably just burn your opponent for an additional 800 on top of Ice Bell's 500, because 1300 damage total is quite a bit and can actually help you if you're going into time, if you're playing at events. So one copy of that. If you choose not to make a Winterbell, if you're under max C or something, you just want a big body on the field, but you don't want to special summon too many times to give your opponent too many draws under max C, you can always make a Clearwing Synchro Dragon, which is still a pretty decent card. I like it. So yeah, it's just a nice alternative to the Winterbell. It's also really nice if you have additional Ice Bells and Glass Bells, so you don't run out of Synchro monsters to summon. Next off, we actually play one copy of Stardust Dragon, and Stardust Dragon is really good right now because it can protect your stuff from being destroyed by your opponents, like True King spells and traps, and things like that. It's just really great for negating any form of destruction, protecting your field if you need it. But, of course, the ultimate boss monster in terms of synchros, we have Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon. So glad this is getting a reprint soon. Crystal Wing, though, you can easily make this just one Ice Bell as a one-card indestructible, quote-unquote, Crystal Wing, but you can negate, opponent's monster effect, which is really nice, especially hand traps. You can negate hand traps with this card too, which is so good. And the fact that if you're attacking into a high-level monster that it has a built-in honest effect, it just makes it really good at clearing fields, and it's a huge threat to decks like dinosaurs and things like that, because they have high-level monsters. Same with True Dracos, actually. So yeah, that does it for the synchros. Next off, we're going to go into the fusions. And also, sorry if you hear a lot of background noise. It's actually raining outside right now. I should probably close my window soon. Okay, so for our fusions, we start off with one copy of Ritual Beast Ulti Kanahawk. This is the main searcher of the deck, and unfortunately limited to 1. So you can target 2 of your banished Ritual Beast cards, return them to the graveyard to add 1 Ritual Beast card from your deck to your hand. Of course, you don't have to return both of those cards to the graveyard. You can always tag out with one of those cards when you're defusing with Ulti Kanahawk, and you'll be fine. Even if you return 1 card to your graveyard, you'll still be able to get your search off. And oh my god, the rain. Be right back, guys. Alright guys, welcome back. It seems like the rain started to settle down. It was just a sudden flash shower. But anyway, continuing on with the deck profile, we have 3 copies of Ritual Beast Ulti Apollo. This is the main beat stick of the deck in terms of boss monsters that we have for our fusions. So when Ulti Apollo actually declares an attack, he becomes unaffected by all of the card effects, which is really cool. So if your opponent has Mirror Forces or anything like that during the battle phase, yeah, Ulti Apollo doesn't really care. But the thing is, it's important to note that Mini Apollo's effect, the main deck monster, when it boosts Ulti Apollo by 500 attack and defense with its effect, Ulti Apollo, when he attacks, is not affected by that. So unfortunately, it will remain 2600 attack when he does attack. So this is why things like Dark Rebellion, things like that, are very important for being able to help us attack over larger monsters. Especially things that have over 2600 attack, it's very difficult to get rid of unless you have like Ritual Beast Steeds to blow them up. Okay, so next off, we're actually playing 2 copies of Ritual Beast Ulti Petalfin. Now, Petalfin is really cool because she cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. So it's really good to just sit on, and your opponent, True Draco spells and traps, Raigeki, Darkhold, things like that, she doesn't really care about. She has 2800 defense too, and boosted under Apoleo can go up to 3300, and if you're lucky and you get 2 effects off, can go up to 3800 defense. So this is just a really big bulky card and really difficult for your opponent to get rid of, especially if they try and target it. You can always tag out, which means you could return her to the extra deck to summon back a Ritual Beast Tamer and a Spiritual Beast monster from your banished zone. So it's really difficult to get rid of. But last but not least, we actually play 2 copies of Ritual Beast Ulti Gaia Pelio. Now, the important thing to know about this is that Ulti Gaia Pelio is a psychic type monster, so that you can send it to the, you can banish it with Rapengu to send a Tamer from your deck to the graveyard, which is really nice. And if you summon it, you have to use one of the one Ritual Beast Ulti monster, which are either Kanahawk, Apoleo, or Petalfin right there. And you need 1 Tamer and 1 Spiritual Beast monster. So it's a really hefty cost to summon properly. And if you do, if you have cards in your hand, you can negate a lot of things. So during either player's turn, when a spell trap card or a monster effect is activated, you can banish 1 Ritual Beast card from your hand, negate the activation if you do destroy it. So that's really good, but it does require you to fuel your hand first with Ulti Kanahawk before you do that. Another cool thing is that you can summon this straight from your extra deck using Winda. So if you crash Winda into something, you can summon an Ulti Gaia Pelio straight from your extra deck, and he'll be 3200 attack. Boosted under Apoleo will be 37. So this is one way that you can actually attack over very large monsters. So that's kind of cool. But if you do summon it that way, it does not get its negation effects, or else it'd kind of be broken. But yeah, there we go. That's it for the extra deck, and that's it for the deck profile. So thank you all so much for watching this video. I really do appreciate it. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like, subscribe for more Windwitch and Ritual Beast content, and leave a comment down below letting me know what I can do to improve. And until next time, take care.